Everybody should be back. All right. So again, if you can, please open up the cameras. It definitely helps for you guys to dialogue a little bit more. All right. So let's talk about what you guys discussed in your breakout room. There was four points of inquiry on the table. It's open floor. Whoever wants to talk about what was discussed in your breakout room.
I'll go. We talked about the first point, which is what is the thesis of a text, and I chose like my breakout room agreed with me, and I said, pass on your knowledge with kindness to the ones you love and live freely.
Thank you. Who else?
Um, I want to add on to that. We chose that one because we believe that wisdom is like not taught, or you weren't born with it. So that's often something you learn throughout generations and you learn throughout when you grow up.
That wisdom, Emily, is a good point because that's become very important once I go into my notes.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good
Okay.
point. Who's next? Anything? Go ahead, Rudy. Were you going to say something, Rudy? I see you took yourself off mute.
No, sorry.
All right. Well, you know what? Go ahead and say something anyway. What were you guys discussing in your breakout rooms?
We discussed. I think we said not to be arrogant about your knowledge, and to try to teach others what you know.
Yes, humility is a central theme. Let's get one more. What was discussed in the breakout room?
I guess I'll say mine. But, I talked about my favorite passage, which was I think number 10, was talking about how you basically don't look at a person's past status, but you look at them now and how they are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good passage. Um, I want to ask you guys about the fourth question. Your favorite attribute or characteristic about yourself. What are some of your guys' favorite characteristics or attributes, personally?
I'll go. One of my favorite personal attributes about myself is having a good sense of humor. Like some people are like, you know what, your sense of humor is weird. I'm like, well, that's the thing I love about myself is my sense of humor.
Yeah,
So I say that.
so that's a great attribute to have. Who else? Personal attribute.
One I'd say about myself is I'm a good listener, and that's something I've trained myself to do. Like growing up, I think I've learned to give other people a space to speak. Um, so that's definitely like a work in progress,
Yeah.
like even to this day.
So, Cassandra, how would you relate that characteristic of yourself to the reading?
I think the text spoke a lot about being respectful to those in authority, um, and helping others who um, are like within your like helping your peers in a way. So I think I don't know, I think being more respectful and like biting my tongue, I think in a group of people. I'm not biting my tongue. I think like just honesty.
Hmm.
Um yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna dive into that a little bit deeper as I go through my notes, especially that listening, and then you brought up this notion of honesty, which also becomes fecund. So what I'm gonna do is provide you guys my notes, a little bit more context to the reading, help you guys hopefully make a little more sense of it. The book is literally titled "The Teachings of Ptahhotep, the Oldest Book in the World," right? And what I would like to do is kind of qualify this claim of the text being the oldest book in the world. A lot of what I'm pulling from will be from the preface of the text. So that also brings up a good point. If you're doing any type of scholarly or intellectual work, reading, to me personally, in general, right, it's always a good practice to read the preface to read the foreword, to read the introduction. Don't do yourself the disservice of just starting with chapter 1. You're going to lose out on a lot of valuable material. If you're planning on going to grad school, you're going to have to do what's called an annotated bibliography. In your annotated bibliography, they're going to ask you, what theory does the text operate under? Rarely, if ever, will you find the text theory from the chapter 1 to the conclusion. The theory is typically found in the preface, the foreword, or the introduction, right? So get yourself in the habit of reading from cover to cover. Even if you go in the bibliography, that becomes very helpful because that gives you source material, right? The bibliography is a list of the sources that the author read to pull their information. So all that does is give you a whole nother avenue of sources to help you do your research. So get in the habit and the practice of reading text from cover to cover. It just becomes beneficial to you, okay? So I forgot. I want to say who I believe is it might have been Emily. One of y'all said wisdom, right? And I said that's going to be very important because Ptahhotep himself was 110 years old when he wrote this text, right? 110 years old. And as the old saying goes, with age comes wisdom, right? So he's using 110 years of experience and wisdom to produce this writing here, okay? At the time when he produced the text, he was in line to become the pharaoh, right? But he neglected the throne and he chose to go the route of the priesthood, right? So that says something about Ptahhotep himself, right? He's willing to neglect this position of power to continue to pursue a life of spirituality, right? What this also says for me, it speaks to how the Kemetic mystery schools operated. And for those who are new, when I say Kemet, I'm referring to Egypt, right? This is the original name for Egypt. So from this, we know that the Kemetic mystery schools produce two pipelines. One to politics, to become a pharaoh. Two, for spiritual practices, to become a priest, right? Those are the two avenues that you could come down from the Kemetic mystery schools. The Medu Neter, M-D-W, Medu Neter, N-E-T-C-H-E-R, is the original word for what we call the hieroglyphics, right? So when the Greeks and the Romans came into Kemet, they went into the temples and they seen the writings on the temple walls. They said, oh, these are the hieroglyphics, right? But what the ancient Kemetics called it themselves was the Medu Neter, right? Now, what becomes important about the Medu Neter, it is the world's oldest and Africa's oldest written system, written language, right? What also becomes important about the Medu Neter is that it does not have there's no evidence. There's no evidence of a developmental stage, right? So when discoverers, archaeologists, excavators went into Kemet and they started to find these writings, right? There's no evidence of the writings being developed. It's produced in completion, right? Not even roughly. They say roughly around the 5th dynastic age is when these texts were produced, but they can track that down and approximate this book being 2,500 years before the birth of Christ, right? So this text was produced 2,500 years before the birth of Christ, not before he died, not before he was even born, okay? So what Ptahhotep was concerned with and the reason why he wrote this book is Medu Nefer. So same beginning, Medu, M-D-W, space, Nefer, N-F-R, right? And the Medu Nefer is good speech. He's concerned with producing good speech. And I'm going to read a little passage from page 16 where he talks about why he wants to produce this good speech. So we're looking at page 16 towards the bottom of the page, okay? This is Ptahhotep speaking to Pharaoh Asa. Right? This is his superior, okay? I want you to pay attention to how many times the act of listening is mentioned and the act of oration is mentioned, okay? Because it's become very important. May your servant be authorized to use the status that old age affords. Going back to that wisdom, right? So he wants to use his status of 110 years on this planet to do something, right? To teach the hearers so as to tell them the words of those who have listened to the ways of our ancestors and of those who have listened to the gods, right? So this idea of listening becomes vitally important. And Cassandra, that's why I asked you, how does this relate to the reading, right? Because they over and over and over, I emphasize the importance of being a good listener, right? But to be able to be a good listener, something has to be uttered, right? And Ptahhotep wants to be the one to make this utterance, and he feels that he deserves to be the one to make this utterance because of his 110 years on this planet. His wisdom authorizes that, right? But this is why he wants to do it. May I do this for you so that strife may be banned from among our people. What does it mean to have strife? What does strife mean?
Hardship,
Mm-hmm.
suffering.
Yep. Tensions, beef, right? What Biggie say, what's beef? He wants to eliminate beef from the society, right? I want you guys to think about our world, our contemporary society. Do we have strife in our world? Hell yeah, right? We strife over race. We strife over politics. We strife over men and women relationships, right? We strife over economics. Anything that brings people together, you can find strife there. So Ptahhotep says, let me teach the society about this idea of the meter nefer, about good speech, so we can eliminate strife from being pervasive in our society, right? So I ask you, what does this reading say about the values of the ancient Kemetic people, right? One, they ain't with no bullshit. I don't want to have no unnecessary drama. I don't want to have no unnecessary beefs, right? I'm not with that. We want to create harmony amongst the people who dwell within the society. That's a high value point for them, right? Age is a high value point for them. Wisdom is a high value point for them. Listening is a high value point for them. Good speech, meter nefer, is a high value point for them. So these are some of the characteristics that make up the values of this society, right? What are some of the characteristics that make up the values of our society? Put it to you this way. So we know that in Kemet, the schools produced either a politician or a leader or a priest, right? This is with the intentions of the school. Why are y'all going to school? To do what? Not hard. What y'all going to school for?
To learn.
To learn? To learn and do, what do you want to do with that learning? To transfer it into what?
To learn, like,
A career?
Somebody said it. Say it again.
A career?
A career, right? Y'all all want to get jobs after you graduate, right? You want to learn some shit so you can transfer that into a job, correct? Right? So what does that say about the values of our school system? What do we value? Say it out loud, Serena, please.
Money, status, wealth.
The bag. Everything is about the bag, right? Capitalism is about the bag, right? Materialism, accumulation of things, who could get the most, right? These are our values. Highly different from harmonious relationships, right? Highly different from good speech, right? So when we think about a course that is on the African oral tradition, what I just articulated for you is the radix point of this oral tradition, the meter nefer, good speech, right? The African oral tradition is about speaking words that give life, not tear life down, right? If you've been in this class long enough, you know I use profanity, right? Which some people may call curse words, right? I don't look at them as curse words, they're just fucking words. But I understand the intention behind that, right? There's words that you could say that could cause harm to a person's being, a harm to a person's spirit, right? That cause them to do wrong things. Those are curses. And that could happen with your words, right? So they understood the power of the words. They understood the science of metaphysics. They understood the science of alchemy, right? The notion, what we call new age or science of the mind, right? The idea that what you think, what you say, and what you act upon will become real. So make sure your speech is good. So what you manifest is good as well, right? This is what the text is about. This is what the people who produce this text is about. It's not happenstance, Cassandra, that your base quality is that you're a listener. That's in line with the ancient Kemetic principles, right? So let's do this. I'm going to put my notes on pause. We're going to transition into our fishbowl, our first fishbowl of the semester. With your fishbowl, don't make it harder than it has to be, okay? You wrote in your journals already. You could literally read your journal verbatim, and that's a perfect fishbowl. You just came out of a breakout room. You could literally talk about what was talked about in your breakout room, and that's a perfect fishbowl. I just gave you guys some notes. You could literally talk about what I mentioned in my notes, and that's a perfectly fine fishbowl, right? All I'm looking for you to do is just start the course conversation about the material. Something simple as, this is what I liked about the text, this is what I didn't agree with about, whatever is sufficient for your fishbowl. So let's not make it harder than it has to be. You have to do 2 a semester. You have 1 time to pass. So what I'm going to ask is for any volunteers. And if there's not any volunteers, I will call people at random. So I see Emily volunteer. Thank you, Emily.
Can I volunteer?
I'm sorry, who was that?
Monica.
Monica. Thank you, Monica.
I'll volunteer.
And Serena.
I volunteer as well.
Serena and Jinlin.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. So that'll be our fishbowl for today. Again, you can pull from your journal, you can pull from the breakout rooms, you can pull from my notes. Everything is on the table. I'm gonna put myself on pause, and you guys go ahead and set it off.
Can I start off with my thesis?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I feel like the main thing that I got from the reading, the main point that was thrown was to always be a good person. Integrity, humility, respect, wiseness, and being good at heart is what's most important.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like that's something we could also pass on to other people, because it's not going to hurt others to pass on kindness and knowledge. And it's something we also learn as we go on. There's one passage that I read that connects to society, is that society is often filled with people with like good hearts and personalities, and it's also filled with people that have evil hearts in them. And I wrote that this kind of connects to our society, because today in our world, it's the same thing. Our world is filled with people with good personality, good hearts, and also people with bad ones, and we often try to stay away from those that have bad ones.
Good point, Emily. Thank you. Next. So either Monica or Serena, you guys are up next.
I'll go. I didn't really write a thesis. I just sort of wrote my thoughts as I was reading it. I really like the passage where it talks about if you do not to confront someone while he's raging. I feel like that's a really important skill to learn, to not play into other people's anger, because if you remain calm, you can retain the upper hand a lot of times. The other passage I really liked was wealth does you no good if you're glum, because I've read that this is actually borne out by studies. People think that they're gonna increase their happiness when they increase their income or wealth, but actually in most cases doesn't happen. People can increase their happiness by meeting their basic needs of like food and shelter and things, but beyond that, more money doesn't really lead to a better life.
Serena, can I ask you a quick question? Do
Yeah.
you have the passage available, like accessible to you?
No, you know, as I was reading it, I started putting the numbers on it, but for those I didn't. I'm sorry.
But what I want to do real quick, because I think you bring up a great point, but that's how the passage ends. But I want to talk about the beginning of the passage. So the passage is number 11, okay? It's on page 21. So I'm going to read just how it starts off. And I want you to think about that as it pertains to what Serena just said. Follow your heart as long as you live. Right? This is how he starts off the passage, and then it ends with, wealth does no good if you're glum. Right? So just take those two things in triangulation to which Serena just laid out for us, and that becomes very profoundly fecund. Go ahead, Serena. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's fine. You know, and I noticed like actually some similarities between these writings and some of the values in the Christian Bible, especially when they're talking about like the son following the what the father is saying, which I would agree is a good value. If you have a good father, there's like a lot of people who don't. So I would say that, you know, this society must have like valued deference, which is true for a lot of history, I think, and the world too. It's only like, I think, our current American society which places like less emphasis on that. Yeah, other than that, my notes are kind of like all over the place. So like, I'm happy to pass it on to the next person unless you want me to say more.
No, you're good. Thank you, Serena.
Okay, and so yeah, I want to go back to what Janelyn said, and I agree with her with the thesis, since I wrote that the writer is trying to give instructions on wisdom and like what to do in the future and what not to do, because God will punish you, and like, yeah, I agree with her.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you guys, for those who fishbowled, because I'm going to circle back to what you just said, but before I do that, Monica, for those who did fishbowl, how did you guys feel about the fishbowl?
It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It allows us to talk about the topic, which makes us help us understand it easier.
I think it goes pretty smoothly because one follows along with the other, like had finished saying.
Yeah, so it's really not that big of a deal, right? So I don't want you guys to make this more than it has to be. You're just really up here sharing your thoughts. It's designed so that I'm not the only one providing information from the course, right? It's designed to allow you guys to learn from one another. Oftentimes, you guys have the answers and you don't even need my input, right? Oftentimes, you may have better answers than me. So it's important that you guys take ownership of these opportunities and you vocalize your thoughts, because it's important, right? I need to hear them because I can learn, and your peers need to hear them so they can learn as well. What I wanted to circle back to, and kind of pairing Serena's understanding of how the similarities with the Bible, and then Monica's statement that you do these things so God won't punish you. So my question to you, Monica, where is the punishment coming in at? Where do they talk about the punishing in this text?
I read it, I think, like on the first reading.
The first passage?
I don't recall what like passage it was, but I think I saw it on the first reading, yeah.
I don't know if there's anything about punishment in the text. In fact, I would argue that there is no mention of punishment. Now, it may be to where some bad things may happen to you, right? It's more of a consequence of your actions, but I don't know if it's a punishment. And the reason why I think it's important to bring up is to draw a distinction between this text and the Bible, right? In the Bible, motherfuckers is getting punished, right? There's no misunderstanding about that. God is punishing folks. Floods, famines, pestilence, right? That's happening. You don't see that here. Let me ask you. Go ahead, Cassandra, go ahead.
I do see one passage with punishment, but I think it's passage 12 on the first reading. It says to punish your son if he neglects your counsel and disobeys what you say. It says God will hate him for who crosses you. I don't know if it says specifically God will punish him, but it says to like correct your son and like he needs to obey you.
Right. And to me, that's not God being punishing, right? That's just to instill discipline in your offspring, right? And punish could be grounded, could be taken away, toys, whatever the case may be, right? But where we do have passage 6, right? Do not scheme against people. God will punish accordingly. If a man says, I shall live by scheming, he will lack bread for his mouth. So even in that, right, they said God will punish, but it's not God punishing, it's a consequence, right? You're being punished for scheming by not having the bread to feed your family, right? So again, it's not as if you're going to hell. That's the punishment that God is offering. The punishment they're talking about here is natural law, right? So if you steal, natural law is you will go without, right? So to me, it's a difference. Another distinction I would like to draw. Who knows the acronym for the Bible? Who knows that the Bible is an acronym? Okay. So the Bible is an acronym for basic instructions before leaving Earth. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. So I'm gonna ask you, what's the difference of that acronym, right, and what the Bible seeks to do, and what's going on here? What's the difference?
To me, it seems like the Bible sets rules for preparation for the afterlife, and this text has no mention of an afterlife.
Yep. You are spot on, Cassandra. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say that I agree with Cassandra because I've put like many of the things that I thought were that I agree with of the passages, and it says to live your life like follow your heart as long as you live. And then the acronym for the Bible is saying like here's the rules, here's the things that you need to do before you die, and that's this like these passages don't mention anything about death. I believe like they're saying live while you can and live kind and peaceful as you can.
And that's the core distinction, right? Think back to last week's lecture, and we watched that like brief 7-minute video, and it talks about how they built the pyramids in direct alignment with Orion's belt, right? And this idea that they're trying to build heaven on earth, right? So the Kemeks were very much concerned with what's happening in the now, right? It's not about the afterlife. To where, to Ansley's point, the Bible is all about setting you up for heaven or hell. That's really what the Bible is concerned with. They're like, nah, we're going to do things right so that way we can have heaven amongst ourselves here, right? Heaven is a life without strife, right? Think about how beautiful our society would be if there was no strifes, no beefs, no bickering. It would be heavenly, right? So the Kemetics were concerned with creating heaven here on earth, not to give you instructions to get to heaven, right? Let me ask you this question. What becomes more useful for systems of oppression, for systems of enslavement, for systems of colonialism, right? Focusing on an afterlife or focusing on creating heaven here on earth right now? What is more useful for system of oppression?
Focusing on an afterlife.
Why, Serena? Why is that?
Because people will just do whatever the church says so that they can be rewarded in the afterlife rather than trying to get their rewards on earth.
Yeah. Cassandra,
it's like that Bob Marley song.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Cassandra, you had your hand up. You want to say something?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about what the Kemetic teachings like incentivize being a good person is for versus like what the Bible incentivizes, which is like we said, going to heaven or hell. But I think the Kemetic one like says to be a good person means like you'll be happy while you're alive, instead of fear as like you know, the Bible uses fear as to teach you stuff.
That fear becomes important, right? Because I could say I could literally be whooping your ass every day, right? And I will tell you, you better do what I say or else you're going to hell. Right? That would allow my actions to be justified in the way that you perceive my actions. Right? So you try to read, I'm gonna cut off your hand. And you ain't gonna bitch about that because if you do, you're going to hell. That makes you an improper Christian, right? You try to free yourself from enslavement, you're going to hell because you're not obeying your master as specified by the Bible, right? So that fear becomes a very powerful tool when it comes to systems of oppression. And I think Cassandra's spot on. You don't read the fear within these pages as you do in the Bible, right? What I would like to do, if we can, is shift to what Serena brought up earlier about wealth not giving you, about wealth making you gloom. Excuse me. I'm going to read the entire passage and we'll discuss that a little bit. It's passage 11 on page 21. So it says, "Follow your heart as long as you live. Do no more than is required. Do not shorten the time of follow the heart, since that offends the Ka. Don't waste time on daily cares over and beyond providing for your household," right? So the only thing that you should worry about on a daily basis is making sure your household is taken care of. When wealth finally comes, then follow your heart. Wealth does no good if you're glum. I want to ask y'all a question. What does your heart desire? Not rhetorical, it's a real question. What does your heart desire?
I'd say happiness.
Happiness. Okay. What else? Christian says success. I'm gonna need you to unpack that a little more because success could mean so much. Success how?
I agree with what she said just about like happiness and like more like having like a successful career, life, having money, being able to have freedom, do the things you want to be able to do, you know?
So would you equate that freedom to do what you want to do to having money?
Yeah, it helps it.
It helps. So Christian, I would ask you, is that what your heart desires, or is that what society has conditioned you to understand what success is to be?
I guess so, but
No,
I
I mean,
feel like
if you feel otherwise, state that. You're not the guest. I said it. Speak on it.
I'm not sure. I think I feel like my heart desires that, like being able to do whatever I want later on, having like I don't know, like I don't know.
Okay. I would encourage you to sit on that a little bit more, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd say like again about with success, like people in society these days saying like money is happiness and it can buy happiness. But for me, like personally, happiness is like the little things like seeing a butterfly on a flower or something like that. Like happiness can be like following your dreams, require yeah, it can require money, but like you have to put your heart into it. Just like again, like live life with like happiness and love. Like you just can't be wasting your time on problems or something that your friend said and it hurt your feelings. Just live life how it's like just peacefully and live as life as happy as you can. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. So peep this, y'all. There's 20 people online right now, right? Out of the 20 people, two of y'all responded. Christian, I'm gonna put an asterisk by yours, right? So for the other 18, 17, not including myself, you don't even. I'm gonna assume that your silence equals not knowing, right? you don't even know what your heart desires. So if you're to take this passage, which states, follow your heart for as long as you live, you can't do that because you don't even know what your heart wants. So if you cannot successfully follow your heart, how is your time being spent? Doing what, right? Y'all all said y'all going to school to get a job, which will lead to hopefully wealth, right? So if this is encouraging us to follow our heart with all that we have for all that we live, and we spending more time chasing wealth, what are we doing? Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to like kind of go back to what I believe Alice said. Sorry, but I just wanted to say like, you know, for me, I would just want my heart to be like happy and at peace. So I want to be able to overcome anything that comes like in my way. And I wouldn't want anyone to validate my life, nor would I want them to choose the path, you know, like for it to be chosen. I want to go the direction that I want, you know?
Yeah. I was trying to save this conversation for another reading, but fuck it. You kind of kicked the door open, Nicole, so we're just gonna roll with it. That's why I asked you the fourth question. What are your greatest attributes and characteristics, right? Because Nicole mentioned this word purpose. When we get to the A Water and Spirit, Malidoma Patricio May text, is really about purpose, right? And from the African tradition, everyone is brought here with a purpose, right? In fact, that they say that that's so much the truth that the baby who is not even born yet chooses their parents. I'll say that one more time. The baby chooses their parents. And the baby chooses their parents because those parents are designed to push them further along their purpose, right? If you're doing their job, okay? What happens is the ancestors, the creator, which if you call it God, whatever you so choose to call it, right? Abu Tala, whatever you so choose to call it, gifted you these attributes, these talents, these gifts for you to actuate your purpose, right? We are so out of alignment with this conception of reality, we're walking around thinking our purpose is to accumulate wealth. Oftentimes, when you follow your heart, you're fulfilling your life's purpose. We have been distracted and separated from this notion of following our heart. There's, it says here, right? Do not shorten your time of follow the heart, since that offends the Ka. What's the Ka? K-A. Anybody look that up when you was reading? So the Ka is understood as the life force of individuals, right? The expression, I don't know if you guys heard this before, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. What does that mean? I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. What does that mean?
Mister, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. There's this expression that states we are all spiritual beings having human experiences. What does that mean?
I'm so sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to say about what you said earlier about living life with a purpose. Like, for example, like let's take as an example for me, right? I'm an inspiring actress. I want to be an actress when I'm older, and my mom, she's a great parent. She's like, go for it, just as long as you have education. So I'm getting my education, and I'll follow my dreams and start doing acting. But I feel like everyone has a purpose, and someone like, as for example, like if someone wants to be a singer, right? They have a purpose and they gave you that talent, and you have to, if you want to, you can follow it. But on this passage, 11, says follow your heart as long as you live. Just follow what you believe that you want to do. For example, me, I want to be an actor. I'm gonna start going to acting classes. I'm gonna try to follow my heart as long as I can. Like no matter at what age, probably 40, I'm still trying to do it because that's what my heart truly believes it wants.
Yeah.
So I agree what you're saying. Like being a spiritual force is like being sent here to do what your purpose was. That's what I believe it means. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. And the thing, it may be that acting is a vehicle that allows you to perform your purpose. It may be that acting might not even be the purpose, right? It may be that vessel that allows you to do what you need to do, right? But let's go back to my question though, and I know you addressed it, but I want let's concretely. What does it mean to be a spiritual being having a human experience?
That our bodies are vessels, kind of.
Absolutely. Does everybody understand what she's saying by that? The body is a vessel, right? So I'll give you this example. Y'all, for the most part, we in California, everybody drives, right? So your spirit is the one driving the car, the one pushing on the gas, pushing on the brake, changing gears, flipping the signals, right? It's going to give the car direction. The body is the car, right? So the body does what the spirit tells it to do. The car does what the driver is supposed to do, right? What the driver tells it to do, right? So your ka is that spiritual essence, right? It's that thing that makes the body think. It's the thing that makes you feel stuff, right? It's the thing when you see something sad, you get the emotion of sadness. It's the thing when you see something beautiful, it makes you feel good. That's your ka, right? When you die, your body goes into what? What does your body go into? When you go to a funeral, the body is sitting in what? I ain't never been to a funeral. So what is the body sitting in if it's not cremated? Them shit is hell of expensive. Say it out loud, Cassandra, please.
A coffin.
A coffin. Break it down. A coffin, right? So it's a storehouse for the soul. So in an ancient Kemetic standpoint, right, we know about their ability to mummify, to preserve the body, right? But it wasn't really about the body. It was about giving the ka the appropriate respect, right? So what would happen is, let's say I make my transition. What my family would do was bring offerings to my coffin to make sure that when my ka leaves my body and is going to the afterlife, it has the nourishment to do so. So you would bring food offerings to that coffin, right? You would bring ornaments to that coffin so it knows that it's respected and revered, right? So that ka is that spiritual life force that gives us life, that breathes life into us, right? So it says, don't shorten the time of follow the heart, because that displeases your spirit, right? We are in a society that has been conditioned not even to pay any attention to the spirit. We're strictly focused on the physical, the body, right? Separation from the spirit, when the spirit is really who we are. Another question. What did y'all feel about the role of women throughout the text? Any thoughts on that?
I thought at the end where they're saying don't reject a joyful woman, that was kind of a little odd to me, but maybe I didn't fully understand it.
Serena, I think if I remember correctly, it's more so about what the joy could do, right? And I don't think it's really, they say women, yes, but I think the passage was more so specified to how someone of joy, in this case a woman, could bring joy into the environment that they're going into, right? So do not let a joyful woman into your household, because that way you're eliminating joy from coming into your home, right? So
Right.
open them in so that way her joy can infuse the space that she occupies. Is more so, if I remember the passage correctly.
I think that can apply to either gender
Exactly.
in the modern context.
Exactly. And I think that's how they meant it, Serena. So a good call out. But what else? What else about? Go ahead, Cassandra. Just shout it out. You gotta raise your hand. Just speak on it. It's cool.
I'm also curious if the text is directed towards women, because it does say things like, if you're a wise man, you should do this. And yeah, it just uses the male pronouns like to direct the text. So I am wondering like if there's like another text for women, or if it does include women, like rules for them too.
That's a great question. If you notice towards the end of the text, he'll start to use he or she. It'll go into both pronouns. But in the beginning of the text, you're absolutely right. Everything is pertain to the man. What do you think about this passage? I'm going to read it. And what do you think this means as it pertains to how they view women? When you prosper and establish your home, again, this is passage 21 on page 26. When you prosper and establish your home, love your wife with adoration, right? Then fill her belly and clothe her back. Caress her. Give her ornaments to soothe her body. Fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. She is a fertile field for her husband. Do not be brutal. Good manners will influence her better than force. Do not contend with her in the courts. Keep her from the need to resort to outside powers. Her eye is her storm when she gazes. It is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house. What do you think that says about the role of women in the Kemetic society?
I think it states that women are well taken care of. Like they're really important because it says like to fill her belly and clothe her back, is saying like give her like the love that she required, give her the love that she is entitled to have.
Yeah. Do you think they position the women as subjective or as actional? Does my question make sense? You guys need me to elaborate a little bit more?
Can you please elaborate?
So when I say subjective, right? So they are subjected to the will and the desires of men, or they're actional in the sense that they could do what their heart desires and be actional, functional individuals.
I think it's somewhat subjective.
So you feel that the women are being subjected to the will of the men?
To some degree, but it's like the world's oldest book. I would sort of expect that, like.
Where do you read this?
Well, just because like what Cassandra was saying, that so much of it is written like about fathers and sons, and you just don't hear as much about like mothers and daughters in this text.
Well, let's keep it to passage 21.
I think that passage indicates that you should respect a woman and not brutalize her in a physical way.
Okay. Nicole, you have your hand up?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, within listening to what you read off the passage, I would say it's kind of like subjective, just because I don't know, in the last I believe the last sentence it says it is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay in your house. So if you treat her right, if you maintain basically pertaining to like a housewife, you could say. So it's like she's compelled to stay in the house. The word compelled kind of influences kind of like subjective, like it's no choice, kind of.
You know what? So Nicole, when I first read this, I felt the same way. But then if you read a little bit carefully, I don't think so at all. So check it. Let me find the spot that I'm talking about. Keep her from the need to resort to outside powers. To me, that's very fecund, and here's why, right? that speaks to her actional ability, right? Because what that's really saying is if you're fucking up, she has all within her power to go find somebody who ain't, right? So if you're not caressing her back, you're not putting food in her stomach, then she has within her right to go find somebody who will, right? And that's where it is by such treatment that she'll be compelled comes into play, right? I'm not forcing you to stay, right? But I'm gonna treat you so well that you wouldn't want to go anywhere else. Jen Lin said in the comments, they're treated as goddesses. And I think that that's right. I would agree with that. But here's another way where you see the actional elements of womanhood. Her eye is her storm when she gazes. What does that mean? Her eye is her storm when she gazes. What's that mean? What does a storm do?
Destroy.
Destroy. What is a gaze? What is a gaze? Gaze.
Oh, look.
So what does that mean?
That her look is dangerous.
So from a black tradition, right? And I had this several times. You go to church, you fucking around in church, and your mom won't say shit to you, she'll just look at you. And you know you done fucked up, right? And you're gonna get all your shit, you're gonna sit straight, and you're gonna listen, you're gonna do everything that you know you're supposed to do, because that gaze indicated that storm that's coming to your ass if you don't pay attention, right? So to me, this speaks to the power of womanhood. You better do what's right. If not, it's your ass, and you deserve to get your ass whooped because you fucked up. Go ahead, Serena.
Is it kind of like that Shakespeare quote, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned?
Bing. That's it. That's it. That's exactly what they're saying, right? So for me, I had to read this a few times to really see that, nah, the women aren't being subjected. Really what this is Ptahhotep giving men game on how not to fuck up their relationships. You know what I mean? So that's why I kind of, I agree with Jen Lin in the sense that, it's about putting women on the proper pedestal that they deserve and treating them that way, right? And we ain't doing that in our understanding of the world today. That's the furthest thing that we do, you know. Any last comments or questions to close us out, especially from somebody who we have not heard from today? So we have Samantha, we have Heidi, we have Christian, we have Jose, we have Yasmin, Rohan, Rudy, Andrew. We have not heard from any of y'all. So one of you close us out.
I was gonna say that the storm being her eye is like a double entendre.
Okay.
Like the eye of the storm. Like the eye of the storm refers to like the center of a hurricane, but then I realized that the original text was probably written in a completely different language. So it was probably not the intention.
I see where you're going with that. It's not off base. Someone else, close us out. I got you, Shereen. Let me hear one more question and I'll reveal for you. No? Nobody? All right, I'm gonna start calling motherfuckers. Rudy, what'd you think about the reading? Or anything brought up in the class?
I don't know. I just found everything really interesting. I think this is my first time joining this class. I tried joining last time, but I had a struggle. Yeah, but I haven't read the book, but everything that you guys said was pretty interesting. I really understood everything well, especially with the fishbowl.
Is there anything in particular that really stuck out to you?
Well, the part where you were talking about how you use the driver and the car to demonstrate the spirit and the body,
mm-hmm.
and how the coffin holds the what was it called, the ka?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, Jalen, it is very similar to the four agreements. And actually, when we get into next week's reading, you'll really start to see a similarity with the four agreements. Serena asked, what does my shirt say? It says white supremacy versus gods, right? And this becomes useful because they look at this notion of gods a little bit differently in comedic sense than we do now, right? And that's why the shirt has gods plural, right? And it's not like God, Buddha, Muhammad, not from that standpoint. But in a comedic sense, once you live a life that is aligned with what these teachings are, right? Once you live a life that is myotic, which we'll read about next week, which are the principles of truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, propriety, right? Once you've done those things and you've done good work within society, you're elevated to God status, right? We think about when we talked about Imhotep, who is the original father of medicine. He went from a father of medicine to a medical demigod 2,000 years after his birth, right? So after his death, excuse me. So because of the works that he did, he's elevated to God status, right? So what this shirt is symbolizing is these notions of individuals living their truest, purest form of being, recognized as gods, versus this system of white supremacy, or what I call white inferiority, because really, if you have to do all these things to make yourself seem superior, you're really inferior, right? So I'm very keen on the way that phrases and terminology are utilized. Let me show you guys the readings for next week and we'll call it a day. Bear with me 1 second. So everybody can see this? Yeah, okay. So under your coursework section, under weeks 1 through 3, we're still there. This is the material we just covered, Hilliard, Teachings of Ptahhotep. For next week, it will be these ones. Karanga Ma'at Part 1, Karanga Ma'at Part 2, Karanga Ma'at Part 3. It's 3 PDFs, but think of them as one complete text. So you only need one journal entry, but please read all 3 PDFs. Don't worry about the Kemetic Proverbs. That's extra. If you want to read that, you can. If not, don't worry about it. But what we're focusing on, Part 1, Ma'at Karanga, Part 2, Ma'at Karanga. Part 3, Ma'at Karanga. I will also email this out to you guys tomorrow, no later than Friday. But if you don't want to wait, you have access to the readings there. Any other last minute questions, comments, or concerns that you have for me? Go ahead.
So while reading this, I was also thinking about Buddhism. Can both like the passages?
I'm listening. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I got pressed on the mic. But can Buddhism be compared to these passages?
Absolutely. It's directly in line with a lot of the Buddhist texts. Yeah. If you have to go, feel free. I just want to answer any last minute questions. So you're not far off with this and thinking about this in the standpoint of Buddhism.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Heidi, I just sent you the link to the Google Classroom, Heidi. So if you can, log on that now so you have access to that. Outside of that, you guys, we're done.